Hey, Paris, can you hear me? Can you hear me? I can't hear you.
Lomit. Okay. How about now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yeah.
All right. That was my mistake. But the good news is that there actually isn't any live audience right now. So
Okay.
we just need to get started, and then but I do have a hard stop now in 20 minutes, so we'll just compress this one a little bit. All right, so for anybody who's out there, we don't know if there's anybody, but we're going to talk about GEO today, and we're going to fast forward to the present. Last time we covered Lomit's predictions in the lean AI back in 2019, several of which turned out to be pretty pressing. Oops, sorry. Hold on, a little bit of interference there. Okay. Back on track here, Lomit. So here we are today now to start to talk about GEO, Generative Engine Optimization, in the present day. And I've run an audit for TYB's website with some interesting findings, and that's what I wanted to go through today with you, Lomit. And just to get your real-time reaction, the point of the show is to build in public. So nothing overly scripted, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And before we get into that, I do have a question for you, Lomit. Can you describe in your own words, what does generative engine optimization really mean? And is it a priority for you all at TYB?
Sure. Can you hear me?
I can, yeah.
You can hear me? Okay, perfect, because I was just using my speaker. So anyway, excited to be talking to you again, Paris, and really going on this journey with you, with sort of building, what we're trying to do here at TYB. But what I would say, in simplistic terms, a lot of discovery now happens with AI generated searches. So, a lot of the LLMs is where a lot of people are discovering, products like TYB and everything else. And what we want to try to do is to ensure that we're able to at least be able to get discovered on those surfaces. And so the way to do that, or my simplistic way I'm looking at GEO, is really just being able to create the right content and the right context to be able to provide to these different LLMs, whether people are looking for us on ChatGPT or Gemini, Perplexity, or Claude, and be able to speak in the same sort of tone as how other people are, looking or asking those types of questions to these different LLMs, and to be able to ensure that TYB is one of the sources that's going to be shown up as one of the citations or responses.
Got it. Yeah, I think that's a pretty fair way to describe it. And what I would add to provide some context is that consumer behavior is shifting in a major way, in ways that it hasn't in maybe more than a decade, if not even say 15 years. And what I mean by that is the ChatGPT primarily and LLMs are the new front door to the internet, really. People are going there first instead of going to Google, because they know they can get an immediate answer to something without having to dig deep into links and do a lot of research. And what this means is this is a whole new surface area for brands to get discovered. And it's quite different than SEO, because the goal is not to rank your pages for keywords, but your goal is to put yourself in the best position to be recommended by AI. And secondly, to make sure that when someone is asking specifically about your brand to AI, that AI gives an accurate answer, and that it actually has correct information and it doesn't hallucinate. Because AI, as you all probably know, almost never will tell you that it doesn't have the answer. It will always give you an answer. The question is it hallucinating or is it true? So I think that is the big difference between GEO and SEO, is that you're trying to actually train the AI on how to position your brand in these conversations, when to recommend your brand, and also just simply to educate them about your brand so that they provide accurate information. And I believe that this channel in a couple of years will really overtake SEO in terms of its importance.
Yeah, and what I would add to that is when you look back to SEO, you know, I know you and I have been in digital marketing for a while, but the opportunity is really to be an early adopter and a first mover onto these new platforms and services, right? And so, you know, the opportunity with GEO, you know, is really to start, you know, thinking about it, not only thinking about it, but start acting on it, which is why, you know, I'm really excited about what we're going to be building here. Because, you know, it's not a matter of just talking about it at this stage, because, you know, the train has already left the station. We need to get on that train, and we need to make sure we get the right seat on that train. So we're not sitting at the back, but we're sitting near the front, right? Where people can find us.
Yeah. I think we're at that point where the wheels are starting to move slowly. You could still definitely catch that train. But it's moving now. It's leaving the station. It's not too
Yeah.
late, but I do think what I'm seeing is there is a lot of awareness now in the SEO community that there is a massive shift happening, really. We're going to be going to a Brighton SEO conference next week in Brighton, UK, which is the biggest SEO conference in Europe. And the entire agenda is all about, not about SEO at all. It's about GEO. And that's the #1 SEO conference of the year. So that really just tells it all. The whole industry has really shifted. And this doesn't mean that SEO is dying or that GEO is replacing SEO, but I think rather it's a whole new layer on top. And there are some common shared best practices, and there are some unique strategies that we'll be talking about more. But it's one of the most exciting times, I think, if you have been in SEO for a long time, like I have. This is probably the most exciting shakeup that I've seen in more than a decade, because there's really such a fundamental shift in consumer behavior, and it's just a whole new game that we need to learn the rules for. So it's really interesting for me.
Yeah, and exciting to hear that you're going to Brighton this year. I spoke there maybe like 3 or 4 years ago, and to be honest, it's an amazing event. You know, I was really shocked with the magnitude of how big it is. You know, compared to a lot of like other SEO digital marketing events, and the fact that you said, you know, at least when I was there, I think it was like 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago or whatever I spoke, you know, everything was all around, you know, SEO. There was nothing really there around AI. And so the fact that the whole agenda is really shifted towards GEO just tells you, you know, the magnitude of the adoption that's really happening right now.
Yeah. So I'll report back later on that. But now why don't we shift over to a GEO audit? I have a GEO audit ready that I'm going to walk you through, Lomit, and full disclosure to the audience that we haven't done any prep for this. So Lomit will be seeing this.
I haven't even seen this audit yet, so I'm really excited to actually see this live and to give you actually my perspective live as well with the audience.
All right.
Yeah.
Great. Well, let's get into it, and I'd love to get your genuine reaction. Let's see. I'm going to figure out the screen sharing. Here we go. And let's open this up. So this is actually an AI visibility report that we have built using a specific Claude workflow. And what it does is it first tries to understand your visibility relative to your competitive set. So it's going to look at how visible you are in AI conversations relative to a set of competitors that it has selected. So we'll get your feedback on the competitors. And it also is through the lens of an ICP. So we're also defining an ICP here who's doing the prompting, the searching. So first we have some overall scores. This doesn't mean a whole lot. It's this roughly 18-point gap, but you know, there's not a lot of context until we get into the report. Relatively thin footprint, partial third-party citations, no Wikipedia or knowledge graph that we could find through this tool. Sometimes that is inaccurate, but we'll come back to that.
Yep.
And then we have strong social proof, which is a positive differentiator for TYB. And let's get into now the buyer profile and the prompt analysis. So this section of the audit is building a definition or picture of your ICP. And tell me if we got this correct, Lomit. This is a D2C brand marketing director. Could be any of these roles: a VP of marketing, head of community, could be CMO at a direct-to-consumer, either beauty, wellness, or lifestyle brand, most likely running on Shopify. And it's e-commerce. Their budget is anywhere from, say, 12 to 60K per year. They focus on the Shopify native stack. And their goal is to increase repeat purchase rates, reducing the reliance on paid ads, building a community asset that compounds over time. And their concern is that the platform feels like a fan app gimmick. It needs proof that it drives real value, which is revenue metrics and LTV, purchase frequency, etc. So I'll stop for a second. How are we doing so far? Did we nail the ICP, or would you make any changes?
No, I would say the ICP is very close. What I would add to that, in terms of budget, it could be, a range that could be beyond 60K, depending on the size of the company. So I wouldn't limit it to just 60K. But I think the key part for our ICP, for the most part, it's a lot of like a community first brands, or brands that want to aspire to be community first. And so, and that's where TYB's strength really lies, right? We really help them to not only activate, their fans into becoming, their greatest growth community engine, but we also enable them with a lot of like features and functionality within our platform to really gamify a lot of those experiences that really enable them to really build those deeper, meaningful engagement with those users. And the key part is Shopify, because every brand we work with, for the most part, works with Shopify, and that enables us to really be able to show the value of users that belong on the TYB community versus the users that they have who aren't in the community. Because ultimately, I think the concern that you put at the end, it really comes down to proving the value, like what's the ROI on the community, what's the incrementality of the revenue, the lifetime value, and that's a lot of the metrics that we're able to demonstrate and clearly articulate with
Okay.
users that are part of the TYB community versus those who aren't.
Great. Okay. So I think we maybe cut the budget ceiling a little bit too low, but for the most part, I think that our analysis did give a pretty good definition of one accurate ICP. Over here, we have some prompts. And these are just a few kind of generic prompts, but obviously their prompting is another very interesting point here, because there's an almost infinite long tail of prompts. These aren't really like keywords, and that is one other major difference between SEO and GEO. In SEO, you can do keyword research and you can figure out what are your head prompts with high intent and that have volume, and you can buy those keywords in Google Ads, and you can also optimize, build pages and build articles for those keywords to try to rank for them. And none of that really exists in GEO. Because everyone is doing their prompts a little bit differently. It's very, very hard to predict. And so what we have done in this report is try to set as some sort of a relative proxy. We're trying to estimate how many relevant conversations might there be in, let's say, ChatGPT and LLMs based on the amount of relevant keywords that are happening. And this is also a little bit of a stretch, because you would make the assumption that there's the same amount of demand coming through AI chat as there is through Google search. And actually nobody can really know this right now. And it differs I'm sure it differs a lot based on what industry you're in. But this section of the audit is now trying to benchmark or give a proxy of the approximate TAM, the total addressable market of relevant conversations based on keyword research. And so we have these 3 different tiers of keywords here. The first one is tier 1, which is, I'd say, bottom of the funnel. Buyer is actively choosing a platform. Tier 2 is mid-funnel, so the buyer knows what they want, but they're still not fully educated about all the options in the category. And tier 3, top of the funnel, is the buyer is still just defining their needs. So we have these different sample queries, estimated search volume, and then the estimated LLM prompt volume relative to that search volume. It's kind of a guess, but 750 to 1140 to me looks really low. So I would even challenge this number. But how does that number strike you? Do you think there's at least 1,000 or more really highly relevant conversations that if you surface, you actually have a chance to win, at least create a sales opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, the way I would put this, obviously, this is really early innings, right, with LLMs. So I would get less hung up, me personally, when I'm looking at this, I'm less hung up on what the estimated volume is here in terms of context, because I've, both you and I have looked at what the SEO volume is, right, and it's magnitude higher than this. But the way I would look at it is clearly there's signal here, right? There's positive signal because there is search that's happening, and I'm sure it's been underrepresented, in terms of what the true volume is. But the other piece of this is, at a minimum, I know there's got to be over 1,000 searches that are happening around, these different stages of buyers around this category for TYB. Mm-hmm. But more importantly, the way I'm thinking about it is the conversion rate on this, because this isn't where people are going to be clicking. This is where people are like you and I, having discussions in private rooms where nobody even knows what's happening in those discussions, but are being influenced by what each other is saying about, a certain topic. And that's the same thing that happens in LLMs. And, the quality of the conversations and the takeaway from when somebody goes to an LLM and having TYB show up, the conversion rate is going to be so much higher, even though we won't be able to track it through a specific click. The fact that, there's even like 750 to 1,000, I know, that's like the worst case scenario, the way I'm looking at it. It's got to be a lot higher than that. But the quality and conversion on this is going to be way higher than somebody, where we're competing for different slots on an SEO page.
Got it. I completely agree with you there. So let's move into this next section, LLM brand visibility score. This to me is where I think I wouldn't put a whole lot of stock necessarily in these numbers. But the first question I have for you, Lomit, is looking at these competitors. Did we get them right? Are these real competitors, or did we miss any big names here?
I would say for the most part, like Yapo, Smile.io, Loyalty Lion, Rivio are, pretty much who we consider as part of our competitor mix. So I think you've pretty much nailed that. To be honest, I am not that surprised to see TYB. I'm not sure how the context of these numbers, but I know that, this is the reason why you and I are working together, because we haven't done a lot with LLMs up to this point. And so, the fact is, our baseline is going to be pretty low to start off with. But the exciting thing, the way I look at this, my interpretation of this is that at least we know the gap we need to make up, whatever that 18 means and 62 means, we know that, that there's a gap to be made up, but more importantly, very confident we will make that gap up, with what we're going to be coming up with.
That's actually a good point. Is that just to bring this back to yet another example of the difference between SEO and GEO, is that the time to get results is very, very different. If we were looking at SEO, and in some industries, it could take you a year or even multiple years in the most competitive industries to catch up and eventually leapfrog the competitors. With GEO though, and primarily because such a high portion of the citations in LLMs are from very recent results, you can leapfrog your competitors even in a matter of weeks, actually, if you really go out hard with citation building and with scaled content. The LLMs are crawling very, very thoroughly and discovering content that's out there. So that's a really positive thing here, that if you were looking at this in the context of SEO, I might be telling you, all right, Lomit, this is going to be a long haul. I mean, we have to dig in and prepare for maybe 6 or 12 plus months of really serious work and hope that they slow down a little bit to try to close this gap. But looking at this in a GEO context, I would say we can get you competitive here, maybe within a couple of months if we really go after this hard. So I think that's hopefully encouraging. We have these scores. I'm not going to focus much on these scores. There is this root cause summary is kind of interesting because it's giving you a couple of like a red lights, like a Wikipedia entry would probably be one of your most powerful citations, because Wikipedia is, probably the most trusted third-party source from by ChatGPT. It's very often citing Wikipedia pages, particularly when there's a brand that's being mentioned in the chat. This one is probably something that you can't do a whole lot about, but the brand TYB, I know you go mostly by the initials of the brand, but it is ambiguous, and there probably are a lot of other, the example here is, I guess there is a crypto token with the same acronym, which could be competing for the same name in the training data. But there's not a lot to do other than to try to drown out the other TYBs. And just to be very clear, that TYB is a business entity. It's the business is try your best, and to repeat that as much as possible so that it becomes cemented in the AI's understanding. And then we have third-party editorial coverage. I think this is probably where you all have the most ground to gain here, is to try to get as much PR coverage and as many brand mentions as possible, and particularly in trusted, reputable third-party sources. Not only Wikipedia, but there's Reddit and Quora. There could be other websites, blogs that might have listicles or any kind of site, including any media that's covering this industry at all. You want to try to get the TYB brand inserted in that conversation. And then the two yellow, I guess, medium root causes here are that you all don't have these structured comparison pages like TYB versus Yotpo. And those can be very helpful, because when people are at the bottom of the funnel comparing, let's say these platforms, having those competitor pages allow the LLMs to lift that content directly from those pages and drop in the answer, which hopefully favors your brand. And there's another mention of the Crypto Blockchain Association here. I don't know what that's all about. I don't know if you're aware of that, but this is, basically, as we move down here, we're going to get into a little bit more detail. I think it's maybe a little bit too granular for this call, but we basically have a chart that is showing these are the companies, these are the competitors, their visibility estimated scores. Again, it's relative, so the precise numbers don't mean a whole lot, but their English footprint from low to high, the third-party citations, a Wikipedia presence, the existence of structured content, and then the niche authority here. And it seems that you all right now have work to do in most of these areas, particularly third-party citations, getting that Wikipedia entry done, and then rolling out structured content, which hopefully we're going to help you to do that with GEO Forge. And then one bright spot here where you're considered a niche authority is that it's you all are a community-powered D2C loyalty company, differentiated, but right now relatively invisible to LLMs. So I'll stop and let you comment on where we are so far.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say is that, this, this is really good context. And to be honest, uh, ultimately what we want to own, the space we want to own is all around community powered, um, D2C loyalty and really, helping brands to turn community into a growth engine. And a lot of our competitors, you know, uh, the difference is, a lot of them do more than just loyalty. They do CRM or they do other aspects of the ecosystem. So they've got a lot more content that's beyond loyalty. That they're able to create a lot of pages around, which they've done a really good job in terms of really creating content. And I think the other piece that you would probably touch on is what's termed in the industry as digital PR, right? So they've done a lot of like outreach to sites and being covered in roundups with other articles and publications. So one of the things that we obviously need to do a lot more on that front. But some of the things that we've started doing, to try and sort of help on that side is, for example, I write a lot of content, for example, on platforms like Hackanoon, which also feed into a lot of the LLMs, and a lot of my content, I'm rated as one of the top writers, so a lot of my content gets tens or thousands of views on Hackanoon, and so a lot of those positive signals are starting to feed into into helping to build visibility for TYB. On Hackanoon, and also a lot of content. LinkedIn is another source that feeds into LLMs as well, and so I've been doing a lot of articles and content on LinkedIn, and that also feeds in. But I think the Wikipedia, we definitely need to address that. Need to make sure that at least the basics are being covered, and a lot of the comparison content, we do have that, and I was just really waiting for us to start working together, so then we can really, be able to surface that in the right way. And so,
Mhm.
you know, um, the way I look at this is that the good news is that that we're in the arena with these competitors who've been doing this a lot longer than us, and we also have, between us, we're going to come up with a compelling game plan to really close the gap. Yeah. So,
Yeah,
yes,
great.
I'm excited.
We're gonna catch them. We're gonna crush these guys.
Yeah.
All right. This is now a little maybe reinforcing of high intent queries. So these are more examples of representative queries where the TYB brand is either absent or maybe partially mentioned. So that's what we have on the left. On the right, we have this is actually an interesting part because it says when AI does mention TYB, what is the current narrative and what is an improved narrative? And I'd love to get your feedback
Yeah.
if we got this right in the audit. So the current narrative is that TYB is a community rewards app used by some beauty brands that allow fans to earn points and collectibles. It launched around 2022 and it's on the Shopify App Store. It's one option for brands looking to gamify engagement, though it's less established than platforms like Yotpo or Smile.io. Okay, that's the current narrative. That seems pretty drab, in my opinion.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
target AI narrative would be TYB is the leading community-powered loyalty platform for D2C brands, trusted by over 200 brands, including uh, Rare Beauty, Glossier, Puppy, and OUAI. Unlike point-based loyalty apps, TYB drives fan engagement through challenges, collectibles, and exclusives, resulting in documented outcomes, including 65% higher LTV, 26% higher repeat purchases, and 1 million in revenue in 1 hour. Okay, built for Shopify with a 23.5 million funding history. Now, full disclosure that I expect some of that to be completely made up, but how much of this do you think in this target narrative is A, it's accurate, and B, it's achievable if we want to rewrite AI's understanding in a more
Yeah. I mean,
comprehensive way?
what I would say is the target narrative has kind of nailed it about 80%. You know, it's good.
Okay.
It's a lot more. It's a lot more compelling, and in terms of how we want to be positioning ourselves. The key thing is, you know, we actually work with over 300 brands now. You know, most of the most biggest and most successful Gen Z direct to consumer brands work with TYB. And so that gives us a lot of credibility because, I
Mhm.
mean, for the most part, a lot of the brands that people know and love that have, huge fan bases that are making on average, uh, you know, uh, most of the brands we work with generate over, $10 million in revenue per year, and that can
Mhm.
go all the way up to like 50 or more a year. So, we're talking about, successful companies and, a lot of the brands that you mentioned, like Rare Beauty, Glossier, Poppy, and, a whole bunch of others have, you know, million tens of thousands, if not millions of fans, right, in their community. And so, that's one of the reasons why they love working with TYB because we're built for that audience, the Gen Zs, and really coming up with compelling experiences to really help them to turn their users into their biggest distribution channel.
Yeah, got it. All right. So moving along here, we have knowledge-based gap analysis, and let me just see with the strategic goals. We'll cover that at the end, and then we'll wrap up for today. The knowledge base is very, very important, and this is one of the most foundational principles of our platform, GEO Forge, because we believe that scaled content is a must in order to win in GEO. You've got to feed the AI crawlers, got to feed the LLMs with a lot of high information gain content. That means it's not a derivative AI slop that you can just generate from internet research, but rather it's content that is grounded in proprietary knowledge from a knowledge base. And so this is, one of the most important parts of this audit, in my opinion, is how can we help you all to build a knowledge base that serves as the foundation for all the content? And part of that is going to be just activating a lot of the conversations that are already happening between you and sales prospects and you and customers. And so we've already started to do that, and hopefully we'll look deeper into this next time. Grabbing transcripts from your Fireflies call recordings and having interviews with subject matter experts. That is going to be the stuff that LLMs right now, simply they can't crawl it. It doesn't exist anywhere online on your website or on the internet. And that to me is what is going to be the big differentiator and the key to success here. These are some examples of knowledge base content. Client onboarding case studies are here, community commerce reports. We talked about the comparison pages and other thought leadership, but I think this is where we're going to be spending a lot of time talking about in the episodes ahead, is how can we keep building and enriching that knowledge base, because that is what's going to allow us to have that content pipeline. So any thoughts about knowledge base?
No, I think this is the part that really excites me, which is, ultimately, you know, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking a lot of transcripts at different stages of the buyer journey, from how they interact with our sales team versus how they interact with our onboarding team versus how they interact with our support team. So really capturing the entire user journey. And the most important thing is creating content on the voice of how customers are interacting with TYB at those different stages, in terms of what are the questions that they're asking, what are the responses that they're getting. All of this is in the proprietary voice of how TYB talks about TYB to users at different stages, which is the most valuable content that LLMs have, up to this point, have not gotten from TYB. And so,
Yeah,
the good news is that once we start feeding this content, it's going to really see shift and change the whole narrative of going back to the previous slide in terms of how we're being perceived right now, because we're not really feeding into that narrative, versus when we start feeding in with the right content, we're going to be able to really influence the way we want to be showing up on those conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's about capturing the authentic voice of the customer, because that same voice is it's the same voice that the LLMs are seeing. I mean, the way someone would ask a question to a salesperson is exactly the way they're going to ask the question to ChatGPT, and ChatGPT should be, your best sales rep in a way. So that's kind of also a way that we're positioning GEO Forge, not only for marketing personas, but also for sales personas as well.
Yeah, and just to touch on the other two, I mean, we're very fortunate because we obviously work with really well-known Gen Z brands, but we also have had a lot of success, and so we have a lot of compelling case studies or a lot of content that's being created on that front that we'll be able to feed into LLMs. So again, it will be giving proof points to LLMs about not only what we say, but to back it up with data in terms of how we've proven it for different brands at different verticals. And then the other thing that we have, going for TYB is we have a really well-known founder that's, Ty Haney, who's, a well-known entrepreneur who started a number of different businesses, including Outdoor Voices, which was huge. It was like one of the early brands that really started a whole movement around community and commerce. And so, the credibility of creating more and more content around her and feeding that into LLMs is going to really help differentiate us from a lot of our competitors, because they don't really have that same level of a founder that's so well known.
Yeah, it's a great asset.
Yeah.
Okay, well, Lomit, just to wrap this up, we have strategic GEO goals, what to do next. And I'm just going to run through this, and then we'll have to wrap it up for today. But number one is, I think, relatively the low-hanging fruit, which is just getting that Wikipedia entry in place, maybe also taking a look at Crunchbase and making sure that it's very clear that there's a brand entity that LLMs understand, and Wikipedia page provides the most evidence of that. Number two is to start rolling out these competitor pages, and we're going to help you do that through our GEO Forge platform. And number three, the case studies. Actually, you do have a lot of case studies already published. I think we need to keep up with that momentum. And ideally, is if you have 300 customers today, roughly, and there is, I'm on the case study page now, but we have 3, 6, 9, 10, 11. There's 11 in total, but there are 300 customers out there. So I think there's scope to do a lot more in the case study area. And then the last one here, actually, there's a couple more, but the publishing, this is a little bit kind of knowledge-based focused, but any kind of community commerce benchmark reports that you can produce with proprietary data from your platform, and basically just getting any kind of proprietary data that's anonymized from the platform that just show how people are behaving in the space would be great in terms of proprietary data. Number 5 is that founder, as you said, the Ty Haney, try to leverage her star power as much as possible, have her do interviews, get her onto podcasts, just try to get as much content from her as possible and leverage her star power. Number 6 is these structured how TYB works pages. We didn't really talk much about that, but that's an opportunity. And then the citation building, where we can basically reach out to websites to be included wherever it makes sense to have the TYB brand mentioned, where LLMs can pick that up. And so that brings us to the end of the audit. I would probably add more goals here, but I think it's time now to kick off this journey together. And in the next episode, we're going to be diving into the platform and looking at what kind of knowledge-based material that you all are building, what kind of content you're building, and have an honest get an honest take about how it looks, if you think the content's any good, and if this RAG system is doing its job.
Yeah, super excited. I love the way that you outlined the audit. Full disclosure, this is the first time I'm looking at this too, and really appreciate that. I guess the most powerful thing is not only doing the audit, but clearly articulating a game plan at the end, which is what excites me. And in terms of the priorities, I completely agree. Let's go through it. In that sequential steps. But super excited, Paris. Obviously, the audience hasn't really seen GEO Forge. I've seen, from what I've seen of it, it's a powerful tool. So I'm super excited. I feel like, just to maybe put an analogy here to wrap it up. At least when it comes to AI. We haven't done much. So, we literally have been, in a manual stick shift car. We've been like, just putting a little bit of gas in the tank and trying to move along. Now we're getting now that car's been upgraded into like Ferrari, which is like self-driving Ferrari, which for the most part will give it the destination of where we want to go, and it's going to really map out, the right GPS way to get to those different destinations. And so I'm super excited. I feel like in the space of where are we now? April, I would say. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked that we're going to really make up a huge sea shift of impact in the next 2 to 3 months.
Yeah, I really hope so, and excited to continue on this journey and find out and learn together. And I love that analogy too. One of the taglines that I was considering for a GEO Forge was a full self-driving for AI visibility.
Yeah.
But in the end, we didn't go for it because it's still a little, FSD is still a little bit of a niche term, and it's associated with Tesla. But I'm glad that you brought that up, because that really is what we're trying to do here, where you tell the system where you want to go, you set the goals, and you always have the control to take the wheel or slam on the brakes if need be. But really, you're trusting the system to get you where you need to go safely, so that you can focus on, the conversation in the car or whatever else that you do. And you can let the AI do what it does best, and you can intervene when you need to intervene. And that's kind of the spirit of the whole platform. It's 90% AI autonomy with a critical 10% human in the loop, basically. So, all right, Lomit, I've got to jump off now, but it's been great talking to you again. And anybody listening, we're signing off. I hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you next week for episode 3.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Lomit.
Bye.
Bye. Right. Okay.